You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU Football Podcast. I am your host, Andre Hagverdian, and will be joined shortly by my co-host, Paul Garrison. Today's episode is an interview with Ryan Lindley, the newest offensive coordinator at San Diego State, who will also continue to take over the role as quarterbacks coach, which he did as of midseason last year. Obviously, Ryan Lindley is a former Aztec quarterback, all-time passing leader, who came back midseason last year after offensive coordinator Jeff Eklinski was let go. Obviously, Ryan came and took over just quarterbacks coach, while Jeff Horton was the offensive coordinator on an interim basis. But now the offense is Ryan Lindley's. He, as the offensive coordinator, he has been installing his offense, his playbook, with the help of his coaching staff, some of which are new, some of which are now currently, again, vacant for the second time this offseason. So he has his work cut out for him, but he, as you will hear from this interview, is pleased with how spring camp has gone, how the players are responding. The fans will have an opportunity at the spring game on Thursday coming up to, that first glimpse of what the offense could look like, what the players can do in it, and so forth. So let's get to the interview. Paul and I talked to Coach Lindley about a week or so ago, and I think this was a very informative discussion, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So let's get to it. We want to welcome back Coach Ryan Lindley to the SDSU Football Podcast. How are you doing today, man?
Good. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, the first time we had you on was about 8 or 9 months ago. Not a lot has happened since that time, huh?
No, it's the only thing, just a little different geographic situation for me and the family, but still coaching ball and trying to win some football games.
Obviously making that change like that mid-season can be a whirlwind, but have things normalized a bit for you and your family right now?
Yeah, I think that the toughest thing for us as a staff is just kind of the change that's gone on. Especially at a place like this, San Diego State, people want to be here and have been here for a long time. So, when something new comes up, I think the biggest thing for us was the amount of interest we had. Obviously that speaks to the program, it speaks to the kind of players we have, it speaks to Coach Hoke, and obviously just the city of San Diego and the alumni base here. So it was a really eventful winter, we'll say that, and we're kind of glad we're hitting spring ball on the run. Obviously we've had recently with Coach Gould taking an NFL opportunity that's created a little bit more going on. So we kind of have felt like 2023 has been the year that something continues to pop up and keeps us on our toes. But I'll tell you what, our kids are having a heck of a spring. They're working really hard, and it's been a blast coaching them through everything.
Yeah, obviously you mentioned you're going through spring camp. You're about more than halfway through. Could you give us an update on how the offense is developing so far?
Yeah, I think I'm excited with where the young guys that we see playing a lot of football for us in the future, the steps they've taken, at different positions. I think we all knew that the running back group was a deep group. There have been guys, and it's kind of cool to see them all kind of take their turns with a good practice here and there. I think you'd love it for a guy to step up and be that real bell cow, but I think they're all playing at a really, really high level and making strides with where they're at. So it's good to see. The tight end group's been really good. Mark Redmond, I think, has taken some strides. There's been some things I know he took pride in. He wanted to improve as a player in some certain areas, and he's definitely done that kind of as a leader of that group. But that's also a really deep room that Coach Eslew has. And it's fun to see some of these guys that are getting an opportunity to step up with some vacancies that have been created on the offensive line. So fun to see guys like Drew Azapardi, Christian Jones, and, BCD, Brinkenshaw Dixon's a guy. He's played a lot of football, and you can tell because when he gets out there and, he knows what he's doing. He does it with some malicious intent at times. And, And we like to see that. He's kind of taking his role on as well.
We've obviously paid attention to a lot of the interviews that you've given, been part of those and things, but you talked about building the offense around the strengths of the players that are in the program. And one thing from Coach, and if I explain this right, but one thing from Coach Hoke that I've really gleaned from my own life is his ability to kind of put off making evaluations, letting the process fully play out before making a decision. How do you, approach that? I'm the kind of guy who can't let his toast finish before checking it, So to see somebody, to ask him, how's this player, how's this defensive line, and he says, I'll tell you in 2 weeks. I don't know, and he means it, and it's a really impressive quality. So how do you approach, I guess, making it an evaluation and a decision on the strengths that you're going to build the offense around when you've only been around these guys for a few weeks in this role?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that we focused on is instilling a culture in these guys. I think the one thing, there's been some consistency when you look at it over the past decade plus on defense. I know a different defensive coordinator, but really when you look at it, it's been Coach Long, obviously Rocky, and then hand over to Coach Maddox, which has been great to see how he puts his own flavor on it. And it's been phenomenal for me, just a side note as a coordinator, to be able to work with him and learn under him, because he does a phenomenal job of getting his guys ready. And I've kind of taken on, I want our guys to have a little edge and nastiness like our defense does too. And maybe that's some time spent with Coach Arnett down at Mississippi State, but I think, the defense has held on to that culture and gotten some continuity and some consistency because of that. And I just want to see our guys on offense develop that as well, kind of take pride in what they're doing. And it's led to some really good competition here throughout camp.
And then, just more on that kind of philosophical side of it. There's got to be a tension, right, between developing the offense around their strength, but also helping them to become better. How do you, I guess, balance that tension between, wanting to instill ideas that you have and help them to get better at those things versus, building it around what you see already?
Yeah, no, and it's a game. It's kind of a juggling act that you have to have. There's things that are going to be bedrock principles of what you're going to be about, and you got to make sure guys are working towards improving in those areas. But also, you got to find what our guys do well and make sure that those are well rounded enough to really take advantage of those traits. So, and going back to your question about Coach Hoke, I think that's one thing I've really taken from him too. It ain't a microwave. This ain't going to be a microwave 30-minute ab system we're going to put in here in spring. So, there's times we'll have a down day or a down period here and there against the defense, and you get a little frustrated, but then you look at it on film and you see where guys are making strides. You see where, and I think Coach Hoke in his wisdom and his experience, he's seen it, 40 times over of the guy that makes those 15 mistakes as a young freshman and young sophomore. And, there's probably some guy in the back room says, hey, I probably got to find somebody else or move on. And he's that guy that can see it and go, no. I see what that kid, I see the light turning on in him, where some guys, at other programs may say, yeah, we got to, after 14 reps, we got to move on, but that 15th rep is where that kid figures it out, whatever it is. And I think it's really great to see how we've kind of instilled that and allowed our guys to kind of take ownership of what they're doing right now.
Yeah, and Paul and I were at the first spring practice, and for what we do, we pay attention to who's running with the ones, who's doing this, who's playing this position. And we asked Coach Hoke about that. He said, don't pay attention to any of that yet. 2 weeks later, we're going to evaluate and rank players, and then we're going to have a better idea. So as an offense, how do you go about kind of making that identification of, who are our best players at these positions?
Yeah, no, it's good, and having some fluidity there helps because, sometimes it's happened with guys of, a younger guy does some things well at the beginning, maybe because we're a little lighter, mentally with the load that we're giving guys. And also sometimes just based on, he's going against the younger guys as well. So it may be more of those guys on defense, not necessarily doing their job as opposed to him doing really well, So it helps when we slide guys in and out. We give guys opportunities to get a lot of good reps in, and you kind of let guys earn their keep in a sense. So it's been really fun. And that's where I say the competition in each one of our groups has been really great. I mean, even in this quarterback room where, we know Jalen's done what he's done, and Moose, we plan on Moose being our guy, but seeing how Kyle Crum stepped up, Liu, really our entire room here is really awesome. So it's been fun to see how those guys really step up to the challenge, and whatever reps they get, they know they got to take advantage of them.
Well, one of the things we hear coaches talk about is installing the playbook. How do you go about developing a playbook as a first-time offensive coordinator? And, how much of that is already built and how much is it still being built?
Yeah, I think the beauty here, I've learned from some guys, I've been around a couple other places where you're installing, you're bringing a new system in. And I think the beauty of what you got to do, you got to find a fine line of, being inclusionary with your coaches. So that's Coach Eslew, that's Coach Goff. That was Coach Gould while he was here, really put his stamp, gave us a lot of good stuff. Coach Krause. And that's where I really found that when we built this staff, I thought it was a good group, a great group of men too, obviously cohesive, work together. But also you got to kind of have a bedrock of what you do too, so there are times you kind of got to put the foot down and go, you know what, guys, I just think we're getting, you get a little bit too all over the map. You got to make sure you still have that center and that focus. So, I think we did a good job of that, in the short time that we had those new coaches here, getting that thing installed, getting the playbook finalized. And now the biggest thing always, which is what I kept saying, we have an installation schedule, but it always seems like, you hit spring ball, you got a plan. Hey, we're going to go, here's practices 1 to 10. Here's what we're putting in, boom, 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 boom. At some point, something's going to go a little haywire. We say, you know what? Maybe we bit off a little more than we can chew here at practice 3, so we push it back. So our biggest thing right now is just to make sure our kids, when it comes time, we get these scrimmages, we get this live action. I want them to play as fast as possible, so it's always like you'd like to put in a little bit more, but our guys are doing a great job giving them what they got right now. And we're really figuring out what they're going to take hold of and take ownership of.
You mentioned the QB room. One guy obviously who's not there, but we had on the podcast was Javance Johnson.
Okay.
And Javance, we asked him about the coaching change in midseason. You're committed. What is that like? And he said, basically, you called him the first night that you got into San Diego and, all of those kinds of things, that you were the big reason why he was able to stay committed to SDSU. Just from your perspective, why was calling him and making that connection so important is one of the first things that, you did as a member of San Diego State staff?
Yeah, no, I mean, recruiting is the lifeblood of your program. And if you don't, I was with a guy in the SEC, we used to say recruit or die, because it's legit. The players are what make the whole thing run, and you got to go get them. So I think the number one thing when I walked in, and at the time I was obviously just coaching quarterbacks, so it was, hey, where are we at, on that level? And as soon as I was on the plane, I'd ask the guys of, okay, what's our quarterback situation? Do we have a guy committed? I was in the throes of our season. I didn't know. So, Nick Emirati does a phenomenal job here in the recruiting department. He sent me over film of Javance. So I watched some of that on my flight over, sitting in the airport, on a layover and checking that out. And, loved what I saw. Javance is a guy that has a ton of talent. We're really excited to get him in here and let him rip it here pretty soon, come this summer. And I said, and I got to give Coach Heck credit because I think he did a heck of a job of recruiting him and getting him committed. And for me, it was a little bit more, hey, the foundation was laid. I just got to hold on to it. So once we knew that, I got settled in. We kind of had a feel for what was going to go on, what was going to happen. Some questions I knew he would have for me. I gave him a call as soon as I could. So, I got settled in. I still remember I'm in the office I'm in right now. And Craig Smith and Nick came in and, gave me some background on him as a kid and as a person and the family. And it was awesome, to speak to him. And we kind of stayed in contact. And I let him know, I said, hey, I'm going to be going 100 miles an hour. So I know there may be guys hitting you up every other day. I may not be that guy for the first month here, but no, I love you and I want you to stay committed and we see you as our guy. So, and thankfully, both him and the family decided this was still the best place for him. And I think he's got a bright future here.
And one of the words that he mentioned most about you was trust, that he trusts you, you with his future, which I think is pretty hard to build in recruiting with everything that goes on. I wanted to just ask about your philosophy when it comes to offering somebody, but it's not committable versus a committable offer and how you navigate that, because it would seem like, trust is at the center of kind of that conversation.
Yeah, I think recruiting is an ever-changing landscape. So, I personally like to say, I think we may only have 3 or 4 offers right now out to 24 quarterbacks, and I think I've only given 2 of those. And I tell each one of those guys that if you decide to commit tomorrow, we're done. Like I'm offering you a scholarship, and a lot of those guys have a lot going on. But I tell them that this is it. Like if you're the guy, you lock it down. We're in a position right now we ain't going to take much more than one. I do operate. I'm not going to spray offers out, especially at the quarterback position. I think it's too important. I think you got to really trust that. Each time you bring one of those guys into your program, that he's a guy you want to hand the keys to at some point potentially, and let him be the face of the franchise. Run the program and be the leader. So I think it's really important. There's a lot of guys that we look at too, where it's like, man, I absolutely love them, but a wise coach once told me you got to see him throw in person. So it's kind of taken me with a few of those guys that there's guys that we really like. We recruit really hard right now, and my big go-to with them is, hey, I'm going to recruit you like I've offered you. There's guys that spray offers. I'm going to recruit you like I've offered you, but I need to see it. I need to see it this summer. I need to see it this spring. We got a really good crop of kids that we're looking at, and I'm excited to kind of continue to gain a hold and make this room my own. But it's a great group right now. I really like the dynamic we got. We got a really good group of guys, top to bottom, and excited to get Javance into that fold.
You mentioned obviously Jalen being the number one guy. With Kyle and Liu, they both came in on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
They both were early enrollees. How is that competition going? And what are you looking for from that backup quarterback?
Yeah, it's gone really well. We had kind of we're 9 practices in, so it's 60%. So I wouldn't say it was like a midterm, a State of the Union. Each one of them came in today, and we kind of, I always like for them to go a self-assessment, because I think sometimes at the quarterback position, it can be a bit of a lot of those guys are type A, they're going to be hard on themselves. So a little bit, I always kind of want to see where they're at. Like, how good do you think you are? How sometimes it's how bad, and I think, gosh dang, man, I know I yell at you sometimes, but you ain't playing that bad, So it's really, for me, it's to get those guys' heads back to, okay, this is where we are. Yeah, 100%. We can get better at X, Y, Z, but at the same time, telling them what they're doing well, what they're picking up. And, we go 100 miles an hour. We got the meeting time and everything we do. And those guys work their butts off on the field. But it kind of helps also to slow them down and say, okay, is there anything at this point? We got most of the stuff in. Is there anything that you're still confused about that we can clear up? Because I just want those guys, as they compete, to play, as hard and as fast as they can. And I appreciate them, because really everybody in this room has been doing that with the opportunities they've had.
We talked to Mark Redman after the first spring practice, and somebody asked him about how the offense was like going through practice under your leadership. He mentioned how good the communication is from you, but he also said one of your sayings is, we want to be the hammer, not the nail. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and where you got that from?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, it's kind of it's always, I've been coaching on defense for a little bit, and it's like, hey, you go out and you impose your will, and that's why I say too a little bit of like, that's what this place has been built on, and the defense is gonna be that, and impose their will on you a little bit. And I, just sometimes I've told the guys that I feel like, with what went on last year, even when we turned it around, the defense was playing really, really well. And for me, I just want to make sure they know that, hey, listen, you got to hold your water in this thing too, and don't just think that we're here to service the defense at times, like, hey, this is, you're here to impose your own will. It ain't just, hey, we got to react to what they're doing. That's the beauty of offense, is really, you should dictate tempo. You should set the tempo. So that's my biggest thing to our guys, is that, there are times that it feels like, and we ain't going to win every rep. That's the reality. It's the beauty of us being so competitive. But telling these guys that, hey, no, I want you guys to go out there knowing that, I know we got a new system. I know they've been doing this for a long time. They got some returning starters, but my message to them, my voice to them has been, hey, so do we. We got a quarterback coming back. We got a couple linemen. We got tight end. We got some really good players with a lot of experience under the belt to come back and really set the tone for this team in 2023.
So tell us a little bit more about that coaching staff and your assistants that are working for you, beginning with the newest member, Jonathan Krause.
Yeah, John is awesome, man. I mean, Coach Krause, he comes and he's a younger guy like myself. His experience at UNLV, I think the biggest thing, and when I was in the NFL, one of the big things they always ask a prospect is who's the best player you played, or who's the guy that gave you the most trouble. And scouts really, and me as a position coach when I was in the NFL, you took a lot of stock in that because it was like, well, this guy to play against him, we can evaluate the tape, but like if a guy has to go against him one-on-one, he's definitely going to know who's a guy and who's not. So when John came into the fray, when we were interviewing guys, it really came up as soon as Coach Sumler and Coach Hoke came in my office and said, well, listen, those UNLV guys have been giving us heck for the last 2 years, and he's been there. And before that, it wasn't really that way, so he kind of turned that room around, got him a lot better 2 years ago, and then went out, and what he did in the transfer portal to make that group a lot better was really impressive, so it was like to see a guy that not only has he developed talent that he's gotten there, and recruited himself, but also has gone out and shown the ability to go out and recruit. So John does a phenomenal job, and he and I actually play. We hadn't really connected since then, but we played together for a quick stint in New England. So seeing him talk ball and seeing how he can get up on the board and explain things conceptually as well as how he does it, he's just a real good mind for those guys to have in the receiver room. And obviously, being a guy that's done it, he played a number of years professionally, so I think that gives you instant credibility. And we just knew we needed some stability to get in that room and get things going in the right direction. And he's been that guy for us. The things we've seen out of some young guys, Philippe Wesley is playing really, really well. Josh Nicholson's a young guy with a lot of speed that we're seeing a lot of improvement from, and really everybody in that room, I think, has just raised their level of play.
What about Coach Mike Goff?
Yeah, Mike's awesome, man. And I mean, he always mentions, it's funny, the whirlwind of this whole thing. I think it was my junior year. He came in and volunteered when I played. So, as the tables turn and time moves on, it's a cycle, the circle of life. So it's really awesome to work with him, and like I said, between John, him, and myself, the amount of NFL experience, we kind of relate back to. And a lot of times too, it's like, hey, if everybody doesn't have an answer or we can't find a consensus, the beauty too of this game is it's a lot about who you know too. So Mike's got his connections of guys that he can reference back from multiple guys he played for. So as we've kind of made this thing our own, it's been good to bounce things off of him and see how he's kind of taken it over. I've tried to empower him to take that line and make it his own.
Salute.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, man, it's awesome to see what he's done in that room. Because you look and it's kind of like it's a newer group when you look at it. I think most of these guys came in 2020 when Coach Hoke came back, and how Savai's got a younger group, but you wouldn't know it. He's kind of taken those guys and made them his own. I mean, he recruited most of them and went out and got them, and you just see the depth that he's built in there. Obviously Mark coming in as a transfer was big time, and he does a lot of things for us with the range that he has. But literally top to bottom, it's almost like you look at his group right now, and there's not a guy that I don't think we see not contributing for us. Like when you look at it and go, okay, if we only take 4 tight ends or 5 tight ends, you wonder who are we going to leave off the bus? Because each one of those guys is a contributor, not only for us on offense, but does a good job for Coach Deacon on special teams. And he's just built a really, really good culture in that room. And you can tell by the way he approaches it every day. I mean, it's almost perfect, man. He almost can flip the switch like that, but also, he's got his laid back vibe too. So you can tell he keeps those guys he sharpens the knife, sharpens the edge for them, but does a heck of a job getting them ready to play.
And then of course you have a couple vacancies. When we talked to you in May, you're a defensive analyst. So I know that you appreciate that position, and maybe somebody who's a little bit behind the scenes, but invaluable, who retired, Gary Bernardi. What is it that you're looking for in that offensive analyst to come and kind of add to that team?
Yeah, and it was really cool getting to know Coach Bernardi a lot more when I was here. Because like you said, I've been in that analyst role, so there's multiple, kind of personalities or multiple fits you can put into that. And a little bit, I think we've kind of seen that, hey, obviously it's tough having one man down, here for spring ball, but we can kind of evaluate in a little bit of like, well, what do we need at that spot? Like we go through spring ball without an analyst, which you're a man down compared to most other people in college football. But a little bit for us, it's like, okay, do we rush and go try to hire somebody? But maybe it ends up, we kind of have too many guys in this spot, and maybe he ends up stepping on toes and maybe feeling like he needs to back off. You got too many cooks in the kitchen on one side. And then you look and, well, shoot, this side we needed a little bit more help there. So I feel like for us in the spring, by the end, we're going to have a really good idea of where we need to plug somebody, where kind of we need a stopgap for a guy to bring in. And like I said, it could be, I was a younger guy, where I guess it's almost an extension of a GA, a guy who's still cutting his teeth a little bit in the business and learning some things. Obviously, for me as a defensive, analyst, I wasn't all knowing on the concepts that I was teaching or the fundamentals as a linebacker coach, like I was at Mississippi State. But right. I think you can get that guy, or you can get a guy that's got a ton of experience under his belt, doesn't necessarily need to or want to go on the road recruiting and do that grind, but has a ton to give in the classroom and, on the film and everything else we can do on a day-to-day basis. So it's kind of, we're feeling that out of what we're going to need after spring, and definitely plan on there's some guys that will jump into the mix that I think could be exciting and help us win some games here this year.
And then the last one, man, obviously need a new running back coach.
Yeah.
And so, what is it that you're looking for in that role, and just not just for that room, but for the offense as a whole?
Yeah, no, and I tell you what, Coach Gould, I couldn't have been happier for him. He had an immediate impact on these guys, and it even speaks to the fact that obviously Coach Horton did a phenomenal job while he was here. So I think that's a room that, the guy that walks in there is going to get a great group of kids that have been developed, and now by kind of multiple guys. You can even see how, there's tinges of different things that Coach G did with him than Coach Horton did, how those guys have kind of been able to become balanced backs. And I'm excited, because when we got Coach Gould, he was a phenomenal hire for us. There's a reason that the NFL wanted to come down here and poach him out of good old San Diego State. So, there were other guys that were involved in the interview process that I think will go back now and have already started to kind of see, what if those guys are still available, I guess, or still interested, and look back on that and kind of decide, what the fit is going forward.
I know we spoke a little bit about Jalen Maiden. Last year, what he did coming from safety, turning quarterback in those first 6 games were incredible. And then, we know the last 2 games, at least statistics wise, were not as good. And you were asked about a month ago at a press conference about, what went wrong maybe in those last 2 games. And you were very open and transparent about how, you take some of that blame for pushing him out of his comfort zone, maybe asking him to throw the ball down the field more. That kind of led to those turnovers. Paul and I kind of talked about this at the time. Coming into that Air Force game, you guys had been eliminated, right? So you weren't playing for a conference championship anymore. And maybe those last 2 games were more of a development for 2023. You obviously want to win the games. Don't get me wrong, but using that opportunity for development, is that how it kind of played out? Or
no, I don't think so. And that's why I say I put a lot of that on my plate, because looking back, as a young coach, it was probably a mistake. The time to work on those things and push some of those things. Paul, you guys have brought it up earlier as far as ideas and installing a system. Like that time is now. Like that time. And I don't want the quarterbacks to go out there and throw a bunch of interceptions in spring practice, but for them to do it now, knowing what they can and cannot do, or learning things that they need to learn at this point in the year, is a heck of a lot better than doing it in the fall. So, looking back on that, it was, we needed to continue to kind of adapt to what we were doing, but I think we still could have done some things just to kind of put some window dressing on the same things that were being, helping Moose be successful prior to that point. So, and that's why I say, like, now there are times that I'm pushing him out of his comfort zone, and he may not be playing as well at times that we saw at points last year, but it's because this is the time, in spring ball, even in fall camp to an extent early on, where I do want to push him. I want to see if he can develop some new abilities, some new traits, and we can kind of expand that playbook for him so that he's got a lot more to bring to the table and help us move the football.
Are there any particular things that you're looking to see from him in the spring that could propel him in the fall?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you see already is like his pocket presence. I think as a drop back passer, he just got a whole lot. He's gotten a whole lot better. Getting these reps that he's gotten, because that's one thing I think. There are positions in football, O-line being one of them, but even being in the quarterback, being in the pocket, that it's hard to replicate that. So you just need reps at it. I think he needed more reps of us just getting him in some drop back game where he had to work through his progressions and stay in the pocket. He does phenomenally when we can move him around, but we just got to continue to make him a better player. And he's taken huge strides already this spring as we keep him in the pocket, and he's kind of become a guy dissecting the defense. So it's been fun to see him develop, and we're gonna continue to push all those things and make him a complete player.
Now, you've been at a guarded secret about your offense and what it's going to look like, and not wanting to give any secrets away for the first couple of games, make the opposing defenses be able to kind of guess. But Coach Hoke did say that you guys might look a little bit like Utah. How likely is it, I should say, that you're going to be like Utah? And what does that kind of look like for you and from your perspective?
Yeah, and first I say this because Coach Ludwig is a good friend of mine, and I looked up to him as a mentor and played for him as a player. And obviously, a guy like that who's been calling it for 30 plus years, I would be a fool to claim that I'm going to be anything close to the level that he is acumen wise. And I'll have my own flavor to the way we do some things. And I've already, at times will call him and tell him how stupid I am for thinking I could do one thing and trying to do something another way. So, but I say this stuff, you're just you emulate who you've been around and who you've seen had success. So, I know for Coach Hoke, obviously having played them and being on the defensive side of the ball, garnered an immense amount of respect for the way they do things. I think they play complementary football, find ways to create explosive plays, while not being, air raided out and spread, still want to pound the football and do some things to build toughness and build character in the program. And obviously you say all those things without a name or a face to it. And a lot of that applies to San Diego State as well, and I think they've just found a way to do it a little sexier than what it's been deemed as before. A lot of people at Stanford back in the day, it was eight offensive linemen and turn a 53-yard field into a little 15-yard box here, just play in there. Where I think Coach Ludwig's done a phenomenal job mixing things from where he's been. And I've done the same, being around different guys. I look at kind of what Todd Monken brought to the table when I was with him in Cleveland, and obviously the success he had with the Bulldogs. A lot of that is players, but, also the plays are involved there too. So it's been fun to kind of put this thing together. And I think Utah is in mind, like kind of a theme that we want. But really a lot of that too is just because we see tight ends and backs just like they do as the strength of their offense. So anytime you do that, I think you're going to favor that. You're going to lean towards those guys and find ways to get them the ball.
Speaking about those tight ends and those running backs, how important is it? Why is it important to make sure that not just the receivers, but all 5 skill position players are involved in the passing game?
Yeah, I think you always, here's a Luddism. He said, if you aren't good at anything, you don't have any tendencies. So sometimes there is a guy, if you got a great player, you better feed him. You better give him the rock. But it also just allows you to be so multiple. I think you can't kind of, you can attack defenses from multiple areas with multiple guys. They can't really look at shutting down one guy and all of a sudden your offense goes haywire. So I think that's the beauty of what we got right now. We have multiple guys that are stepping up and making plays for us. And it's going to be exciting to see as this thing continues to mold how we can kind of make it our own.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out with last season was, the shared workload by the running backs. There was 5 running backs that got a lot of carries. It's like chicken and the egg thing, right? You could say on one hand it was shared because one guy didn't step up, or you could say that the other way is none of them got a chance to get a rhythm to show that they could be the lead guy. How do you approach that, moving forward?
Yeah, I think, and it was interesting. That was a key question we had previously, in our running back interviews of kind of philosophically where different guys see, if you want to go running back by committee, if you see it as, you got one bell cow and only time he comes out is when he's tired. And other than that, you get a breather and you put him back in. And, it's interesting to see how really the dynamic kind of goes back to the same thing. And I know you guys you may roll your eyes like it's a broken record, but it depends on the room. I think obviously when Donnell Pumphrey's here, he's going to get a majority of the carries, but you got a Rashad Penny right behind him. You want to give him the rock too, so you're going to find a way to keep those guys fresh and spell them. So that's where I say, like, we really do have a really good group. The 3 guys that have gotten a ton of time already, obviously Keenan Christensen, Jalen Armstead, and Cam Davis, really, who I think guys maybe haven't seen as much, but is having a heck of a camp as well. Can do a lot of things with the ball, the ball in his hand, and it's been a lot of fun to see those guys grow. And like I said, really, it's we got to leave it open to them because nobody separated them, but it's also because nobody separated themselves in a good way. They're all making plays at a high level and can all do things whenever they're fresh or they get their number called to put us in a really good position.
Last question before we let you go. You've got, I think, 2 weeks before the spring game. What else is there to accomplish before that spring game?
Yeah, I think for us the biggest thing becomes, you kind of go in and you always say, let's let's be as efficient as we can operationally, which usually means, in and out of the huddle, get to the ball, obviously no pre-snap penalties, all that good stuff. And I think we've shown improvement there. So for me, that's a constant kind of, hey, as fast as we can go or as efficient as we can go, really. Because, it isn't, we aren't going to be ultra up tempo, but I want our guys to be able to get in and out of the huddle, allow the quarterback, allow the center to make his calls, all that good stuff. So the faster and more efficient we can be there, I think we can still take some strides there. And I think just finding ways to continue to create explosive plays. I think we've done that. We've kind of opened things up. You're 9 practices in, you open up the playbook a little bit. You finally get out from the meat and potatoes of the thing, start scheming some stuff up to get guys out in space. So it's been fun to see. I'm excited to see those guys. I think some guys got some jitters out in a new system in our first scrimmage last week, and I'm excited to see how they do both Friday and then moving forward to 2 weeks, like you said, for the spring game.
Well, I can speak for all of us at EVT. We're glad to have you back on the Mesa. Look forward to seeing you out there on the spring game and in the fall. Thank you for joining us.
No, always, anytime.
All right, Paul. Our second interview with Ryan Lindley, this time as the offensive coordinator at San Diego State. What'd you think about our discussion with him?
Obviously wrote the article about it and spent a lot of time. Obviously you participate in it, and I probably listened to it, 4 times since. I think what's been striking to me is how similar to Jeff Hecklinski, that conversation turned out to be, which I guess tells me that Brady Hoke is very good at articulating what it is that he's looking for in an offensive coordinator. Aztec fans who are hoping for like a return to, Air Coryell kind of stuff, shouldn't hold their breaths. But at the same time, I think that there's a lot of positives. And I think that, that was clear again in the interview, that, this is the attempt for San Diego State to be great. That's what they're trying to do with Ryan Lindley. There was probably a more conservative choice, probably a choice that, would have had more experience, probably a choice that would have already had a system fully in play. But they obviously trusted Coach Lindley. If it hits, I think this could be, a crucial, important hire for State.
One thing that, he brought this up is just, other than just him coming in midseason and then becoming the offensive coordinator, they've had so much change around him. Assistants, analysts, recruiting coordinators, bringing a running back coach, and he's gone after a month. I like how he mentions that, like, people are calling. People want to interview to come to San Diego State. That's a good sign that no matter the team having a subpar year, winning 7, losing 6, that people still want to come here. And that's a testament to the program, the brand, Coach Hoke, and so forth. One of the running themes among, not just fans, but even Coach Hoke brought it up, is the running back by committee, right? Mm-hmm. 5 running backs, getting, I think, at least 40 carries last year. I think only Jordan Byrd had like 102, and everybody else was in the 40s to 60s. And I thought it was funny when I asked him about that philosophy, that they were asking running back coaches that same question in interviews.
Right.
And that is a big thing. And I think he brought up a good point. You'd have a Rashad Penny, you want to get him out there. But if you don't, you have one guy. If you have different skill sets, I think those are all things that you could play multiple guys in different spots. What I think they did too much last year was play multiple guys in the same spots and give them the same type of carries, and it didn't work out for most of them, or any of them really. The other part of that is the Utah aspect, right? We know about Andy Ludwig, we know that connection. I think what you laid out in your article, which was really nice, was the personnel of the roster is very similar to what Utah had this year. I remember when the Aztecs were playing Utah in week 3, we doing the preview, all we talked about is how their coach was talking about their receivers were not stepping up and they were not
Right.
making plays, and
Right.
they were young and inexperienced, and how they were leaning on the tight ends and the running backs. And you're hearing a lot of that now. Mekhi Shaw has made plays. You have Raphael Williams. But it's still the same boat that Utah was in. And so leaning on the running backs and the tight ends is going to be very interesting in 12 personnel, in potentially 21 or 22 personnel, where you only have one receiver out there and you have two backs and two tight ends. So yeah, I think as much as Coach Lindley wants to be a little bit mysterious about what it's going to look like, I think we have a pretty good idea what it's going to look like.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. And I try to also lay out that, in taking the personality of its head coach, I'm not sure that they know what it's going to fully look like, and they're going to allow that competition to play out and kind of decide it for itself. And I think in an ideal world, those choices would be made for them because somebody would just completely separate themselves in whatever role. You mentioned a Mekhi Shaw, who every single practice that we go to, he's making great catches. People are having a hard time covering him. And so if he can elevate himself, well, then maybe you start saying, okay, we have a dependable receiver. And that kind of process, again, is going to play out over, the rest of spring and then in through the summer. I think that it's really hard to wrap our minds around the idea that the leader and the leaders and that they don't have a design that they're trying to fit players into. And because that's just the norm. I mean, the norm is that the people who are in charge, they know exactly what they're looking for. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're going to find the right people who can do the things that they need to have done. And to reverse that and to kind of build it around the actual people that are there, is much more mom and pop. It's less technical, but at the same time, I try to present that in the article. I think there's an argument that can be made that San Diego State, if they try to do exactly what UCLA is doing or do exactly what USC is doing, that is a really high bar to be able to, because they're not going to have the resources. And if they're going to try to copy those things, right? It's one thing for Burger King to try to copy what McDonald's did. But if you and I were opening up a burger spot, copying McDonald's wouldn't make sense for us. We would want to find our own niche because that's the way we could be successful and be elite. And I think San Diego State is trying to do that. It reminds me of the Padres, actually. I think the Padres are a great example of the whole dynamic. You remember years ago, Petco Park had that really, really deep right and center field. Jed Hoyer, who was the GM at the time, they asked him, should we move it in? Should they do that? And he said, no, keep it the way that it is. He said, because what we can do is we could get speedy outfielders who aren't necessarily going to hit home runs, but can hit doubles and are really fast, and they can cover that. And that can be our own niche because we're going to play 80 games in this huge cavernous ballpark, and everybody else will be built for the home run and they'll be built for all of that kind of stuff. But we're going to play that small ball and built around pitching and defense, and we'll have that unique characteristic and we can compete that way. And I think to his point, Japan in the World Baseball Classic that was held at Petco, they played a bunch of big teams that could mash, but they were able to win playing that style that fit Petco Park at that time. Now you fast forward to now, and the Padres are competing because they're out dodgering the Dodgers. You know what I mean? They're spinning and doing that same recipe. And so if the Aztecs could do what Alabama's doing, do what Georgia's doing, then yeah, do it. You should copy them. But if you're unable to, then I think you have to try to find a different path and a different way forward. This is the attempt that they're making, which is to truly build something new every year.
Coach Lindley's kind of discussion about recruiting, he mentioned recruit or die, which I think Coach Leach, he kind of alluded that came from Mississippi State, and I think it was right. Mike Leach thing. watching film of Javance Johnson on the flight from Mississippi to San Diego, where he has he's no idea what's happening. He's flying across the country, about to become a quarterback coach, and he's watching film. He's getting prepped, and then he's calling Javance, right, building that trust. And I think
Lindley's on the plane. Okay, I think you said Javance was on the plane.
no, Lindley said when he was on the plane coming to
Gotcha.
San
Yeah, I
Diego,
misunderstood.
he was watching film of Javance,
Right.
because at that point he was committed, but they had no idea what Javance was thinking. We know now what he was thinking because we had a chance to talk to him, but
Right.
at the time they probably didn't. And I thought it was interesting. He mentioned quarterbacks for class of 24 that they have 3 or 4 offers out there. I've seen 3. And I think when he said, if you decide to commit tomorrow, saying that he said that they say that to those 3 guys, then they're done. First one to take the offer is good. And in this world where people are changing minds, transferring, you could say, well, is that really the right way to do it? Because if somebody commits now, 9 months later, he might not be committed anymore. And then did you lose all this time to recruit another quarterback, right? But I think that goes back into the whole trust thing. If you're making that commitment to a player, that player, depending on what type of person that is going to remember that, is going to hold on to that when when it's time for them to finally make their final decision. But what's interesting, if you look at those 3 guys that they have offers out, one of them is from Starkville, Mississippi. Coincidence? I don't think so. Trey Petty. He's a 3-star quarterback. If you look at all of his offers, what happens when you look at San Diego State guys who have offers, right? You see the Pac-12, you see the Mountain West, you see maybe some of the Texas schools because if they're from Texas, but you don't see any Mountain West or Pac-12 schools. You're basically fighting with Big 12, Big 10, HBCU programs. So this is a guy that Ryan's experience in that area from being at Mississippi State could potentially help them land this great quarterback, so.
I agree. And again, I think you see the same kind of idea of San Diego State trying to do something different. A month ago or so, when Josh Simmons made his choice to transfer, and the sources and things that we were able to talk to that said that NIL was a part of that. And I wrote an article at the time just basically saying that NIL is the thing that, the expectations for what a move to the Pac-12 could be, what Snapdragon Stadium can be. If San Diego State doesn't get into the NIL world, that impact that everyone was sure what it would be becomes unknown again. And I think that that's another way because, you mentioned Rashad Penny earlier. What would that have been like if as a freshman, he is, returning all kinds of kicks for a touchdown, but can't see the field on offense because he's behind Rashad Penny. He's behind Donnell Pumphrey.
Yeah.
Would he have transferred? Or Donnell Pumphrey? He's a freshman. He comes in and really turns their season around. Would he have been somewhere else? Would he have made that choice? And I think, if they're able to form this relationship with whatever QB, say, listen, we're going to take the risk of a team as a program. We're going to take the risk you just mentioned, and we're going to not have another quarterback. We're not going to recruit him. We're done. I think it makes, if that quarterback turns out to be a really early starter, and then, all the different things that can happen around NIL surrounding that kind of player and other stuff, it just makes you think twice because, somebody did invest in you, somebody did trust you, and you trusted that program, and you helped to have ownership of San Diego State. And so I think you can also see why that's smart from that perspective. And but then keeping on with the theme of Ryan Lindley, and I think what we learned from the interview with him, I think I totally did not understand Mark Redmond's when he made the quote that they want to be the hammer, not the nail. I totally thought that was all about toughness. It was that's how I took it. That's how I understood it. That Mark Redmond doesn't just want to be a receiver that catches the ball or a tight end that catches the ball, but he wants to block and he wants to be physical. And that's the way I took it. And for Coach Lindley to give it a completely different idea, I think the way he took that is really exciting because if there's been one consistent theme of San Diego State's offense the last handful of years, maybe the last 10 years, it's that they're predictable.
Yeah.
And if you're predictable, you're not the hammer, right? I mean, that's the crux of that. And so I thought that it was a very illuminating idea. And then again, alluding to Utah, Andy Ludwig figured out how to make the run first offense. What did he say? Sexy.
Yeah.
And that's what that means. That means it's not predictable. That means you're surprising people. You're playing the chess match and you're beating them. And the fact that's what he wants it to be, that he wants to impose his will on the other team, set the pace, set the tempo, decide how the game's going to be played, and to have that mentality. As he said, we've seen that from San Diego State's defense, but it's not really been something that we've seen from San Diego State's offense for a long time.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people might be listening to Coach Lindley and thinking, okay, we're going to go back to the pre-RPO days where it was play action and fullback and running. And there will be some of that, but I do, as what you mentioned, I think there will be a lot of variation, a lot of motion, a lot of guys split out that you didn't see back then either. I think predictable is what dooms offenses, because no matter how good your players are, if you're running and lining up the same way every time and just saying my guy is better than yours, it's just not going to work. Eventually the defenses are going to be like, it doesn't matter if your guy is better than my guy. I'm going to stop it because I'm going to use all 11 guys. That being predictable is how offenses are doomed, and being unpredictable, lining up in a formation and running a completely different play out of it that you did the last time you ran it. That's what works in football right now. That's what I think Coach Lindley is getting at when he talks about being multiple and being diverse and utilizing multiple running backs, multiple tight ends, because typically when you line up in, one running back, one tight end, 3 receivers every play, and you're running the same route trees for the receivers, it's defenses can stop that stuff these days. There's too much film out there with technology and all that stuff that defensive coordinators just can figure a lot of that out. And so that's the challenge for offensive coordinators now, is to how to be unpredictable. Good stuff.
Very good stuff. I also found interesting his idea of talking about how there's flexibility within the depth chart.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been seeing Brandon Crenshaw-Dickson running with the twos all camp. It was interesting to hear him talk about, they're trying to figure out, when they see a young guy playing well, they're trying to figure out why. Is this player actually legit, or are they competing against other guys who aren't very good, right? Is it at the beginning part of camp when we haven't given them too many plays, so they're able just to play fast because they only have to do one of 3 things? And they're trying to eliminate, kind of scientifically, all the different reasons what it could be. And then when they're left with, there is no excuse for why this guy is playing well other than the fact that he's good, then they'll trust him. And so when he was talking about, and Coach Lindley was talking about the message that he's been giving to the offense in that same section where he was talking about that Redmond quote, he said, yeah, you know what? We're just starting with the offense. I get that. And the defense that we're playing against every day has been doing this for a long time. Yes, they have veteran players coming back, but so do we. And he said, we have a quarterback coming back. We have 2 linemen coming back. We have, and multiple linemen coming back and all that kind of stuff. And so I was wondering, what was that reference to? And exactly what that means for what we've seen in the depth chart, because I do know that we're not there at every practice. I know that Brandon Crenshaw-Dickson posted a picture on his Instagram where he was running with the ones. And so that's just an interesting concept and an interesting idea that maybe it's better in spring when you're so far away from fall camp, it's better that Drew as a party is running against Garrett Fountain, and you can actually see how good he is versus BCD going against Garrett Fountain, and both of them aren't really, in this space getting tons better off of those reps. So that would be really curious to see, how they did that. Young defensive lineman, same thing. Is Dom Oliver and Darian Dalton, are they truly better? Because every time you ask about it, coach mentions the second string more than he mentions those two guys. And so it's just interesting. I'm curious to see how they do that. But I did think that was a very kind of behind the curtain answer about how they try to approach the question without a preseason, right? If this was the NFL, they could play those guys in the preseason and it would answer all of those questions. But without a preseason, how do you answer the question, is a guy actually going to be ready on Saturdays? Are they actually going to be able to produce? And the way that they do it is they make sure that they're playing on the higher teams. So that way they're facing the stiffest competition. They're facing the most veteran players. You front load a bunch of content. So you're having to make them think about what they're supposed to do and see if they can still play fast and still play effective. And so it's just a smart thing that it would probably have taken me a few years to figure out how to do that, if I ever would have that responsibility.
Yeah, before we should probably mention Jalen Maiden, quarterback.
Yeah.
Lindley is the offensive coordinator. He's also the quarterback coach, and we know the quarterback is the head of the offense. I thought it was interesting. He talked about improving his pocket presence in the spring with more reps. That was something that I thought Maiden did pretty well early in his first few games.
Mm-hmm.
Watching games, we were getting used to the Aztecs quarterbacks getting rid of the ball quickly, right? Burmeister, and then Kyle, Crum, and even Liu for the little stretch in Boise. And then Jalen Maiden comes in and he's holding the ball. Maybe at times you're thinking he's holding the ball too long, but he was finding guys downfield. And I think, that maybe at the end of the season, that became more of a detriment. But if that's something he's improving in, moving his feet, being able to move around and still, make plays out down the field, that should definitely help the offense. And that's part of the unpredictability as well. If you have a drop back passer that's not mobile, well, guess what? That's one thing defenses don't have to worry about.
Right.
Whereas with a quarterback that is mobile, they got to worry about rollouts, bootlegs, and then just the play breaking down and him rolling out himself. So all stuff that, we'll see. We'll get a chance to see in the spring game, and then we'll see where that is, and then all the way out, obviously, until fall camp, where as you get closer to week 0, I guess it's not week 1, it's week 0 this year.
Yeah, weird. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I would phrase it, when we saw Maiden prior to switching to safety, I think we would both agree that he had the best pocket presence of Jordan Berkshire and Lucas Johnson. And it was maybe the lack of decisiveness on that and the rolling out and putting the ball in danger too much and stuff like that made him fall below those guys on the depth chart. But it was that pocket presence that was there. It was the pocket presence when we had Jordan Berkshire. When we asked him, we said, "Hey man, what is it that he does well?" And he's really good from in the pocket. And so if there was a danger of him not throwing a football for 8 months, it was that elite skill to be calm under pressure, to be able to go from read to read, to being able to do that could be lost. And I think that it's good news for Aztec fans that is, of all the things that he picked out, that's what he picked out, because as you say, that's what's going to make him, I think everything can build off of that. If you have a mobile quarterback, then the lanes that defenders have to rush through become more predictable, and you have to have outside containment, and you have to make sure everyone stays in their lane. But if you have the skill to be in the pocket, then you're just playing right into keeping the guy in the pocket. And then the flip side of it is, if your goal is to make him move his feet and to be able to do that, well, if he can be really good in that regard too, then it's kind of pick your poison. And San Diego State's schedule, is really tough the first 6 games. It's hard to predict them to be, favorites in a lot of those games and all that kind of stuff. But I think the part of the equation when it comes to San Diego State that isn't solidified yet, especially with actually, I'm going to say that, I'm going to take that back. But I think you saw at the end of the season, I would argue that even in the games where he played bad, he was the most consequential player on the field. And it was him not playing well that made the Aztecs lose or kept them in the game when he did, because there were flashes all throughout even the games that he played poorly at. And so I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that Jalen Maiden could be the best player on the field in every game that he plays next year, if he can take that next level and take that next step. And if he is that player for San Diego State, then they could have a really good season. I think the trouble is that if he's not, what are they left with? And that I think is where it gets a little bit dicey for them. Is I'm not sure that you're going to expect, those special teams touchdowns that they got a year ago or 2 years ago. The defense, may not be where it was. It'll definitely be different. And so I think that if you're looking to try to be, and why not? It's March, hopeful for that season. It rests on what 1-8 can do, and that Coach Lindley is saying that he's already improved dramatically over the spring. I think should make Aztecs fans excited for what he can produce.
Yeah, as we talked about, the spring game is this coming Thursday, March 23rd, 6 p.m., Snapdragon Stadium. Tickets are free. Parking, I believe, is $10. So come out and check it out. We'll be there. Before that spring game, we will have another episode coming out, and it will be with one of the new coaches at San Diego State, Boje Philly Moiatu, defensive line coach. So it was an opportunity to catch up with him, get to know him a little bit better, because he is a new coach to San Diego State. I think you guys will enjoy that conversation, and that will come out before the spring game. So stay tuned for that.
It feels good to be at this place in our coverage. We definitely have had conversations a full year ago about, off-season coverage and being able to provide coverage through spring and all those kind of things. And so as spring is wrapping up, I think that our coverage has been very, very good. And, I look forward to some, just creative opportunities as we try to bridge the gap between, spring camp and those things. But, you do a great job, man. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you as well. Thank you guys for listening, because we always appreciate the listeners the most. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, follow, whatever platform you listen to this, and we'll talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.